We talk a lot about ageism, and we almost always frame it as a form of prejudice. But what if, in a lot of modern workplaces, that's not the real story? What if the problem isn't our personal bias at all, but a total breakdown in how we signal and recognize value? Let's dig into that. Okay, so let's start with the idea that pretty much everyone holds. It's the default explanation you'll hear in HR departments, in diversity trainings, you name it. And that assumption is this. Ageism is just a problem of personal prejudice, right? One person has a negative attitude about another person's age. It seems straightforward. And look, it's definitely part of the picture. But the data? Well, the data tells a much more complicated and frankly way more interesting story. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. A huge global study basically turned this entire assumption on its head. When researchers looked at data from a very specific kind of place, we're talking highly performance-driven environments, they found the exact opposite of what you'd expect. This is the number that changes everything, negative 0.0794. It's a negative correlation. Now, I know it might not look like much, but in the world of social science, this number is a bombshell. It suggests that in certain high-achieving systems, we might be seeing outcomes that look like ageism, but are actually coming from a completely different root cause. And the context here is key. This wasn't some small, isolated survey. We're talking about data from over 600 people across 65 different countries. They measured the link between ageism and what's called the orange value system in spiral dynamics. All you really need to know is that this orange mindset is super logical, strategic, and all about performance. Think of places like Silicon Valley or Wall Street. And that correlation? It's statistically reliable. It's not just random noise in the data. And you can see this reversal pattern so clearly here. Earlier studies, which were looking more at general social attitudes, they found a positive correlation. But this new data, which zooms in on that performance-driven context, it shows a negative one. The relationship has completely flipped on its head. So, what on earth is going on? Well, what the data is really pointing to is a massive shift in how we signal and see value in the workplace. It's basically a clash between two completely different ways of thinking about respect. For centuries, that old signal was king. In a traditional hierarchy, your age and how long you'd been at the company were simple, clear signs of your value and authority. But a new signal has come on the scene, especially in these modern, competitive environments. Here, respect isn't about how many birthdays you've had. It's about what you can do right now. It's all about your contribution. So here's the absolute crucial point. The data suggests that as this performance-driven logic gets stronger and stronger, age just becomes a less relevant signal for value. It's not that people are suddenly more biased against older workers. It's that the system's whole operating system has changed. It's filtering for a totally different kind of input. And this is where things get really complicated, because not everyone sees this shift in the same way. In fact, depending on your own underlying worldview, you will diagnose the exact same situation in a completely different way. This is the absolute core of the diagnosis dilemma. You have one single event, let's say a younger employee gets promoted over an older one, and that one event can trigger a whole range of conflicting explanations for why it happened. This table shows exactly how that plays out. So, for someone with a tribal or purple worldview, that promotion is a violation of loyalty to the elders. A blue worldview, which is all about rules and order, just sees a structural problem. The green worldview, focused on community and fairness, immediately diagnoses it as systemic exclusion. And that orange worldview we've been talking about, they see a perfectly logical outcome of performance filtering. You have 7 different value systems all looking at the same event, and they come up with 7 totally different causes. Is it any wonder that a one-size-fits-all solution is just doomed to fail? And when you get that root cause wrong, your attempts to fix the problem don't just fail, they can actually backfire and create a whole cascade of awful, unintended consequences. So, for example, an organization might roll out anti-bias training, thinking the problem is just people's bad attitudes. But if the real issue is that the system itself values performance above all else, that training is completely useless. Or maybe in an attempt to look fair, they start promoting based on tenure. Well, that directly attacks the performance logic and totally frustrates your high achievers. In both cases, you're treating the wrong disease. And this is what creates a devastating cascade. You start with the wrong cause, you intervene on the symptoms. This creates a ton of confusing noise. Are we about seniority or are we about performance? People start to lose faith that the system is fair at all. trust erodes, and ultimately your talent just fragments as people get fed up and leave, totally confused and demoralized. So if the problem is this complex, with so many different causes and such a high risk of making things worse, how on earth can anyone navigate it? Well, the answer lies in a new generation of predictive tools that can actually model all of this human complexity with real mathematical rigor. Let's talk about something called a dynamic programming model. This is not your standard HR survey, okay? Think of it like a weather forecasting model, but for human behavior. It takes all these messy human things like fear and trust and values and turns them into variables in a predictive equation. It basically lets you model how a decision will ripple through the complex psychology of your entire organization. And this isn't just theory. This is a real tool called the SD Navigator. It's a dashboard that visualizes the psychological state of a team, their fears, their values, their levels of trust, and then predicts how different management decisions will change that state. You can essentially simulate the impact of your choices before you ever make them. So, how are these incredibly complex tools being built? Through a really cool emerging trend called AI vibe coding. Instead of needing a whole team of PhDs and elite coders, you can instruct a powerful large language model, the same kind of AI behind tools like ChatGPT, in just plain English, and it will build the application for you. You just describe the vibe or the logic you want, and the AI handles the code. I mean, think about how powerful this is. You could just type a query like this one. You're asking an incredibly complex question that cuts across psychology, statistics, and organizational behavior. A few years ago, this would have been a 6-month research project for a whole team. With AI vibe coding, it can be a real-time analysis done in seconds. And this brings us to our final critical question. This is the tightrope that leaders have to walk today. If you mislabel a fair performance evaluation as ageism, you can destroy your entire meritocracy. But if you dismiss genuine ageism as just performance filtering, you allow real discrimination to fester. Getting this diagnosis right isn't just some academic exercise. It's one of the most critical challenges facing organizations today, and it forces all of us to ask, what are we really valuing?